On the night of June 3, 1989, columns of tanks and armored vehicles from the People's Liberation Army rolled into the center of Beijing. They were ordered to clear the city's streets at any cost. For 7 weeks prior, peaceful demonstrations had brought the world's most populous nation to a standstill. Protesters had paralyzed the capital and inspired sympathetic marches in over 400 cities nationwide. To reassert control, the Chinese state executed a massive military mobilization, deploying hundreds of thousands of soldiers to crush the movement entirely. The state's choice to use lethal force transformed its relationship with the public, creating a political template that defines modern China. To understand how a peaceful demonstration ended this way, we have to look back at the frustrations that first brought the people into the streets. In the spring of 1989, China was undergoing rapid economic transitions. Market reforms had eroded the Mao-era guarantees of lifetime employment and workplace benefits, known as the Iron Rice Bowl. At the same time, inflation was steadily eroding the buying power of ordinary citizens. This economic anxiety compounded when Hu Yaobang, a former Communist Party general secretary who had been ousted for his sympathetic attitude toward intellectuals, suddenly died on April 15th. His death created an immediate political vacuum. Looking at this photograph from the weeks that followed, the scale of the public reaction is undeniable. What began as a localized memorial gathering quickly expanded to encompass hundreds of thousands of people filling Tiananmen Square. The mourning rapidly evolved into a targeted protest. Students and workers united around 3 specific, relatable grievances: runaway inflation, pervasive bureaucratic corruption, and the lack of democratic participation. The government offered no clear response to these economic anxieties. By ignoring the initial petitions, the state allowed a peaceful vigil to escalate into an existential challenge to their authority. As the democratic movement rapidly expanded to hundreds of cities nationwide, the government remained silent. In response, on May 13th, the students escalated their tactics by initiating a hunger strike in the center of the square. They were young, but they were deeply committed to democratic reform. As the English text on this hunger striker's vest shows, many were willing to risk their lives to force a dialogue. The May 13th hunger strike declaration highlighted their demands, protesting the government's indifference. Further down, point 3 isolates a core grievance, an editorial characterizing the movement as turmoil. The students demanded this label be retracted. The timeline of the hunger strike coincided with the arrival of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev for a historic summit. Because of this meeting, the global press corps was already in Beijing to cover the event. With international cameras suddenly pointed at the hunger strikers, the government could no longer resolve the crisis in private, forcing a split in the top levels of the Communist Party. Behind closed doors, an invisible political war fractured the government. Party General Secretary Zhao Ziyang argued for a conciliatory approach and continued dialogue with the students. But a hardline faction, led by paramount leader Deng Xiaoping, favored an uncompromising response. They maneuvered to sideline Zhao and orchestrate a forceful crackdown. The ensuing military mobilization was so extensive that researchers classified it as a military coup d'état. This analysis points out the mobilization was designed to overthrow Zhao Ziyang's leadership and eliminate the social movements. Deng Xiaoping ordered an estimated 35,000 soldiers from multiple divisions, including the 27th and 38th Armies, to converge on the capital. On May 20th, the government declared martial law. The military divisions moved inward, tightening a perimeter around the unarmed civilian population. Deploying hundreds of thousands of troops to invade their own capital demonstrated a definitive choice. The regime prioritized absolute political power over social reform. The standoff persisted into early June. By the twilight hours of June 3rd, the military received their final orders: clear Tiananmen Square by dawn. Armored vehicles and armed troops breached the city limits. Moving along Chang'an Avenue, the military advanced through the makeshift barricades. They opened fire with live ammunition into crowds of civilians and bystanders who attempted to block their path. For the student leaders at the center of the movement, the violence was incomprehensible. Recalling the night of June 3rd, Student leader Wang Dan described feeling completely numb, unable to believe the army would shoot its own people. The use of live ammunition against the public marked a point of no return. For many, it destroyed the idea that the People's Liberation Army existed to protect the people, replacing a sense of shared purpose with a new reality of state power. By the morning of June 4th, the square was empty. The sun rose over a battlefield of destroyed bicycles, burnt-out vehicles, and heavily armed soldiers patrolling the ruined streets. The physical clearing of the square was immediately followed by a systematic campaign of arrests. The government hunted down leading dissidents, forcing many to flee the country through underground evacuation networks like Operation Yellowbird. Concurrently, the state media launched an aggressive campaign to rewrite the narrative. They labeled the events a counter-revolutionary insurrection and punished citizens whose accounts of the violence contradicted the official line. The state recognized that controlling the physical streets was not enough. They weaponized their domestic information networks to ensure their military victory was followed by an absolute victory over the public record. The long-term political lesson of 1989 shaped the decades that followed. As noted in this text, the tragedy became a top political taboo. The regime proved it could liberalize its economy while ruthlessly suppressing democratic transition. The censorship apparatus systematically omitted figures like Zhao Ziyang from official records, engineering a deliberate blank spot in history. Yet, despite state control over the narrative, one moment on June 5th slipped through the blackout. A column of heavy metal tanks was suddenly forced to grind to a complete halt on the asphalt. A single, unidentified citizen stepped in front of the lead vehicle. Holding only shopping bags, he stood in direct defiance of the advancing military machinery. The Chinese state largely succeeded in censoring the events of 1989 within its own borders, but this single photograph circumvented their control, ensuring the world would have an enduring visual record of the true cost of authoritarianism.